Welcome back. Today, we're going to start talking about some of these Toolman argumentation concepts that you need to use in your position paper. So, this week, we're going to focus on how to use the sources that support your thesis, right? You're going to use them, you're going to extract grounds from them, and then develop a warrant to connect those grounds to your own argument, right? The claim idea, that's a Toolman word. You already know what that is. A claim is the same thing as a thesis statement, and you've already got one of those. You already know how those work, so we don't need to talk anymore about this. But this idea of grounds and warrant, it's similar to what I asked you to do in the op-ed, because in a way I was sort of trying to encourage you to practice for this final paper. Because one of the interesting things about facts, which is what grounds are, is that they don't stand alone in terms of convincing readers. So, let's look at some examples before I give you any more information about that. Because, of course, you've already looked at these sample paragraphs. You clicked here to get a look at them. So, let's go ahead and pull them up here. Okay, so as you can see, there is one from each sample paper. So, you could skip around if you don't want to look at the one for the topic that doesn't pertain to you. But honestly, I think it helps to see multiple different examples. These are both from sample students. And so you might, even if you're writing about the sugar tax topic, you might not agree with this student's thesis, right? And that's okay. You may believe that we should not have sugar taxes, right? And you'll have obviously a very different source to support your argument than this Davis person that she uses, right? But the idea of using grounds and warrant, you will do that same thing. And there's some other things she does here that we need to talk about, right? Okay, so let's move through this here, the prompts at the bottom, because I don't want to ramble and make the video too lengthy. Okay, readers like topic sentences. They like to know what's coming in the paragraph. If they are confused, you run the risk of them not being persuaded, right? And so you want to have topic sentences. And if you look at this, you will see the first sentence here is the student's topic sentence, right? Where she's basically making clear that one of the reasons that she supports a sugar tax is she believes that it will fight obesity. And of course, there's no I think here or anything like that because there's no first person writing here. But indeed, that is her belief, right? And so that in that topic sentence, she makes clear that that's one of her reasons. Then she has to introduce the source, right? Because academic audiences, and particularly those that are reading position papers, expect to see sources, but you can't just start launching names at them. And so, indeed, she's got the source's first and last name and the title of the article. Thereafter, she can just refer to her as Davis. That I'm sure you found pretty effectively. There's the intro, right? What about the grounds? Well, here's a hint if you had trouble finding these. Grounds are always facts, right? They're either numbers, they're statistics, they're things that are already proven, right? Right. So if I said, well, we should have a sugar tax to help fight obesity, and they said, and you said, Jeff, what are your grounds? And I said, because I really think it'll help. It's really going to help a lot, right? There's no facts there. There's no grounds there, right? And this is what sources do for an argument is they don't just lend credibility, they lend you facts you can use to help convince your reader, to help prove your thesis. Sorry for using air quotes. I hate air quotes, but again, I mean, there's both positions are quite viable here, right? There's no one right answer, so we have to put the word proof in air quotes. Okay, so where do the grounds come in? Well, you can see her kind of introducing Davis and talking about Davis's article, right? And, the student, there's no quotation marks here, right? And that's because it is written in the student's own words. She's paraphrasing, right? She is using her own words, but what is she using from the source? You got it. she is using facts, right? So she says, well, Mexico used to be fourth in the world in purchasing sodas. They added a 10% tax. And then the consumption of the sugary beverages dropped 12% in just 6 months. Those are facts, right? Now, those facts alone are grounds, right? They are things that could be used to support her argument. But if the paragraph ends right there, it's really not very persuasive, right? Because if you end the paragraph there, you run the risk that the reader says, so what? Right? No matter how good the stats are, even if you think you chose the perfect quote. So what do you need? You need the warrant. The warrant is where you use your creative ideas, your persuasive writing to show the reader why those facts matter. Right, here's one more fact. Pardon me. This is still grounds, right? Because it's a fact about that it appeared to improve the consumption of water. Right. So what does all this mean? Well, this is an important point, right? All this suggests that the tax helped improve Mexico's health, according to the student, right? Again, you run the risk that the reader will say, so what? So she has to connect the dots for the reader. She has to make it really clear that the whole idea behind these things, whether you agree with them or not, is not to bankrupt businesses, but to hopefully create some changes in terms of public health, right? And so all of this is all the warrant, right? This is where she's showing why those facts matter. She's connecting those facts to her own argument about the sugar tax. Like I mentioned earlier, in the op-ed where you had the part where you had to use Obama or Roe, this is similar, right? And I gave people feedback on how well they use the sources in that paper. So you might want to even revisit that feedback to see how you're doing balancing these concepts, because it is like a balance of facts from the source and your creative interpretation of them. It can't be one or the other, right? You want a balance of both. Okay, so if you are a sugar tax topic person and you don't want to watch the e-cigarette part, then I guess you can skip ahead because we're going to talk about that one now. But again, I do think it's helpful to see both. Again, this is a body paragraph, just like the other one, from one of the sample papers. I put the student's thesis there so you understand what he's trying to support. But, when you look at the papers, you see it's a very, traditional kind of layout, right? You've got an introduction. We talked about what goes in that, leads up to the thesis, and then the body paragraphs come, which when you're talking about the sources that agree with you, you need at least 2 body paragraphs devoted to grounds and warrant, right? And it's going to be similar to what these students are doing. You point to a source, you make the grounds clear, you develop the warrant. That's the end of that paragraph, right? Then you point to another source that agrees with you, grounds, warrant, and then you can look at the source that disagrees with you. Now, of course, you could do it in a different order. We'll talk about that next week. Some students like to kind of start out with the source that disagrees with them to sort of address the opposing viewpoint's concern earlier on. We'll talk more about the pros and cons of that, but generally, just follow your own intuition there. Okay. Completely, this is the other topic, right? But again, the concepts that are being deployed here are the same and they're deployed successfully, and that's why I would consider it an A paragraph, right? So here's the topic sentence. Here's one of the reasons that this student supports more regulation is because e-cigarettes can cause harm. They're not perfectly safe, and indeed can cause particular harm to teens, and that is the topic of this paragraph, right? Because the whole point of having 2 sets of grounds is that you want to develop different kinds of proofs for your thesis, right? So you don't want to just point at the same thing two different times, right? Like I'd have to look at the sample paper to see what he did, but I think he's got one paragraph about the problems that these things cause teens, and then there's another paragraph about kind of a different set of grounds that doesn't have as much to do with teens, right? Anyhow, you want different kinds of grounds. That's what creates a well-supported argument. Anyhow, here is the topic sentence. That's pretty easy to find. Where's the introduction of the source? Well, it's right here. He included the first last name of the source in the title. I like that he got the periodical's name in there, right? Because, of course, everybody's heard of Harvard, builds some credibility for this person. Again, we're not going to put a note on authority here. You should not be cutting and pasting anything from the annotated bibliography. It's a different kind of writing. And if you do that, it's going to lead to problems. Anyhow, so here's the introduction here. Where are the grounds? So remember, his reason for this paragraph is that e-cigs present risks to teens in particular. Reader says, prove it. And he says, okay, here's my grounds that I have from Dr. Ross. They've got this chemical that causes permanent damage to the bronchioles. Okay? They permanently cause lung damage. And there's a potential for a risk of addiction to other drugs and impairing prefrontal brain development. There's the grounds, right? So this is, I mean, you've read a bit about the topic, right? And so you understand why this is kind of scary stuff. However, again, we're thinking about the audience. And just like I said with the previous paragraph, if we stop here, you run the risk of the reader saying, so what? Right? You have to do the work of the warrant, right? And I do think that typically what works best is to have the grounds and then the warrant, right? Because again, for each point that you're extracting from the source, you want to show why it supports your thesis. Why does it matter, right? And so, the student shows you the grounds and then he develops the warrant, right? And he says, well, look, I just showed you in the previous paragraph that lots of more teens are using these things, and so they're exposed to this. If we could have more regulations, if we, for example, cut down on the advertising, then we could reduce or mitigate the impact on them, right? So again, this is all, again, here's another way to tell the difference between grounds and warrant. When you're deploying the grounds, you're going to see some quotes possibly, or even if it's paraphrased like this one, you're going to see in text citation, right? Because you're pointing at the source, right? But the warrant is where you're using your own ideas to connect it to the thesis, and thus in the warrant section, there's no in-text citation. Do you see? Your paragraph should look like this, right? You should have a nice balance of ideas from the source with appropriate in-text citation, balance of that with your own creative, persuasive use of those facts, of those grounds. That's the warrant. I hope you found this helpful. This is a challenging distinction, and I know that warrant is kind of a weird word, right? I tried to have fun with it on the check-in quiz. Hopefully you got that question right. That's about all I got. You're gonna have the chance to create your own paragraph like this and get some advanced feedback both from me and from other students before the papers due, right? So you can see how you're doing deploying these concepts. So keep clicking forward, see what else we've got, and then you'll be able to get into that discussion board assignment. Take care, and I'll talk to you later.